John F. Kennedy International Airport, or JFK for short, is the largest airport serving the New York metropolitan region. In 2024, a record-breaking number of 63.3 million passengers flew in and out of JFK, with JFK being New York's major airport and the sixth busiest in the nation. You would think it made sense that it has a direct rail connection to Manhattan, the center of New York City, right? Well, not really. JFK Airport's current rail connection is the JFK Airtrain, an automated people mover that loops around all terminals and connects passengers to the Howard Beach station on the A train and Jamaica station on the E, J, and Z trains. In the Long Island Railroad, JFK is better connected by transit compared to LaGuardia and Newark, the other two major airports in the region, in my opinion. But planners back then wanted way more than a people mover for connecting JFK Airport. Multiple plans for a direct rail link to JFK have been proposed over time. So what were the plans back then? How did we end up with the airtrain we have today? And is a direct rail link to JFK still needed? You will find the answers to these questions in this video. JFK Airport started construction in 1943 and opened in 1948. It was known as Idlewild Airport, or more formally as New York International Airport. It was intended to relieve congestion at LaGuardia Field, which opened 9 years earlier. Planners had thought about connecting JFK with rail since the beginning. They wanted to revise the IND Wentworth line, which dates back to the 1939 IND second system, which envisioned a branch of the Queens Boulevard line along Wentworth Boulevard to Rockaway Boulevard. When JFK Airport and the Wentworth Expressway were built, planners saw an opportunity to build the IND Wentworth line in the medium of the expressway and extend it to JFK Airport. But Robert Moses, who was leading the Wentworth Expressway project at the time, did not like transit, and even refused the bare minimum of leaving space in the middle for a transit line to be built later. In 1968, a plan to connect JFK Airport with the Long Island Railroad was included in the Program for Action. The extension will be a spur off the Aldebar Atlantic Branch. Program for Action projected it to cost $100 million, or around $946 million in today's dollars. No detailed alignment were determined, but running through the Baisley Pond Park area was indicated as the most feasible and less disruptive route. If built, JFK Airport will have direct transit connection with not just Midtown and Lower Manhattan, but also Brooklyn and other parts of Queens. The ride to Midtown was projected to be around 20 minutes. This would make JFK much more accessible, as traffic was already bad back then. However, with the fiscal crisis in 1975, this project was cancelled along with many other transit projects in the city. In 1978, the MTA made an attempt to speed up the travel time to and from the airport using existing infrastructure by introducing the JFK Express, a premium fare subway service to serve JFK Airport. The JFK Express started at 57th Street and 6th Avenue in Midtown Manhattan and ran along the IND 6th Avenue line, Fulton Street line, and Rockaway line to Howard Beach, where shuttle buses will take passengers to the airport terminals. In October 1989, with the opening of the 63rd Street Tunnel, JFK Express was extended to 21st Street Queensbridge. However, because of low ridership and riders' preference for the cheaper and more frequent A train, the JFK Express was discontinued the next year, on April 15, 1990. That same year, the MTA proposed an express rail link connecting Midtown Manhattan with both LaGuardia and JFK airports, estimated to cost $1.6 billion then, or $4 billion in today's dollars. The rail link will cross the East River using the Queensboro Bridge. It will travel to LaGuardia Airport and then JFK Airport, with two intermediate stops at Shea Stadium and Jamaica. However, Port Authority projected a low ridership on this rail link, and the MTA made it less of a priority. In July 1992, a $3 fee for passengers departing JFK, LaGuardia, or Newark was approved by the FAA. The departure fee was estimated to generate $120 million per year. The Port Authority dedicated the revenue from the departure fee to pay for the rail link, which by then had a $2.6 billion price tag. The plan was aimed to be feasible by the New York State DOT and the FAA, but was opposed by nearby residents and advocacy groups. The rail link also saw controversy because of the terminal location on the Manhattan end of the line. Many wanted the rail link to terminate at Penn Station or Grand Central, but the Port Authority selected Lexington Avenue 59th Street as the terminal location. The plan lacked political support and would require an increase in road tolls and PATH train fares to pay for the project. In addition to the economic recession of 1990, the rail link was cancelled in 1995, when the price has once again grown to $3 billion, or $7.6 billion today. After the rail link was cancelled, a 7.5-mile-long monorail or people mover was proposed to connect the airport terminals to Howard Beach Station on the A train. The project was to cost $827 million, or $1.7 billion today, and the Port Authority wanted to pay for it with a passenger facility charge, or PFC for short. In 1997, the final EIS was released with 8 alternatives. Eventually, the Port Authority chose light rail over monorail, and a branch to Jamaica was added, bringing us to the Airtrain system we know today. Construction started in 1988, and after multiple delays, it opened in December 2003. Planners didn't give up on a direct rail link to Manhattan during and after the Airtrain was built. One of these proposals that caught my attention was to reactivate the abandoned Rockaway Beach branch and extend the Airtrain from Howard Beach to Midtown using it. In 1999, the RPA released a proposal called the MetroLink, which included an extension of the Airtrain along the LIRR Atlantic branch and then into Lower Manhattan and eventually to Midtown via a new East River Tunnel and the 2nd Avenue subway. The MTA was not interested in this proposal, so it went nowhere. In 2004, the MTA, the Port Authority, and several other departments conducted a feasibility study on options to extend the Airtrain directly to Lower Manhattan. The study proposed a 1,500-foot elevated structure at Jamaica to connect the Airtrain and the LIRR Atlantic branch and came up with 4 options for crossing the East River, which includes using existing tunnels or building a new tunnel. With a new tunnel alternative, trains would run every 15 minutes, with a 36-minute travel time from the airport to the Fulton Street complex in Manhattan. The cost was estimated to be $6 billion, or $10 billion today. It was projected that 100,000 LIRR riders and 4,000 to 6,000 Airtrain riders will use the new tunnel. With the Montague Tunnel alternative, service to the airport remains the same level with a slightly longer 42-minute trip to Fulton Street. The estimated cost was $3.5 to $4.5 billion, or $6.1 to $7.8 billion today. The project was favored by then Governor George Pataki, but his successor, Elliott Spider and David Patterson, didn't. Meanwhile, the cost of the project has skyrocketed from $6 billion to between $8.6 and $9.9 billion, and it was eventually halted in 2008. The last attempt for a direct rail link to JFK that I found was in 2017, when then Governor Andrew Cuomo announced the plan to renovate JFK Airport. In September 2018, the MTA examined a direct rail link to JFK using the abandoned LIRR Rockaway Beach branch. Eventually, the Cuomo administration decided to lengthen Airtrain and add lanes to the Van Wyck Expressway, which will surely solve the traffic problem. Just kidding. As you can see, despite the continuing effort of planners to build a direct rail link to JFK since the construction of the airport, none of them have left the drawing board. We ended up with a people mover, which still took forever to get built. It is disappointing to see that after 77 years, we still don't have a direct rail link to JFK Airport. So do I think a direct rail link to JFK Airport is needed today? Well, it is complicated. The short answer is probably not. What I mean is that we currently have the Airtrain. It's not perfect, but like I said at the start of this video, it is better than a transit connection at LaGuardia in Newark. With so many other projects the MTA should consider, I don't see a direct rail link to JFK as a top priority. But that doesn't mean it shouldn't be considered sometime in the future, and I have come up with a few alternatives on a direct rail link to JFK Airport. The first option is an E-train extension from Jamaica Center to JFK Airport. This extension will be a branch of the Southeast Queens extension of the E-train, either taking over the LIRR Atlantic branch using the provisions east of Jamaica Center Station or along Merrick Boulevard. Either way, the line would then split into two branches. One would go to JFK Airport, running along Guy R. Brewer Boulevard, Baisley Boulevard, and JFK Expressway. The other could take multiple forms and serve the transit deserts of southeastern Queens. I prefer the option of taking over the LIRR Atlantic branch, as that would help save cost. Additionally, E-Trains can get a new train yard at Gwen Eiffel Park, which is zoned for transportation and could be converted into a yard when the extension gets built. The extension will also help increase capacity on the E. The current terminal at Jamaica Center can only turn around 12 trains per hour. By building more efficient terminals on the extension, the E-train capacity can be increased to 18 trains per hour. To further boost capacity, maybe consider an extension of the J train to Southeast Queens to supplement the E, or have the Southeast Queens line be an extension of the J train instead, so the E train will not have to branch and can serve JFK Airport with full capacity. For the second option, I got inspiration from the PATH train extension to Newark Airport, and it's a little bit of a fantasy proposal. In that video, I mentioned the possibility of the PATH trains taking over the Newark Airtrain to directly serve the terminals. So it got me thinking, at some point, JFK's Airtrain will have to be replaced. Can we have a subway line take over the Airtrain's elevated structure and right away to directly serve the terminals? I came up with a few possibilities. My preference is a branch of the Queens Boulevard line. South of Jamaica Van Wyck, the new branch will continue along Van Wyck Expressway and rise above ground to connect with the elevated structure of the existing Airtrain. Stations will be added along the line to serve the transit deserts of South Jamaica and South Ozone Park. To have the most capacity, build the Southeast Queens extension so the E can get 18 trains per hour, and QBL Express can get a combined 36 trains per hour. However, the JFK Airtrain is far from being retired, and the subway and Airtrain have different operators, making this a non-starter. Third and final plan is a revision of the 2004 plan for the Airtrain to run on Aldebar tracks to Manhattan. The 15-minute headways they proposed in 2004 isn't good enough in my opinion, as missing a train could increase travel times to as much as 51 minutes, only 4 minutes faster than the existing alternatives. The 2004 study needs to be re-examined. I think we likely need a new tunnel, as I do not think interlining with the subway in the Montague Tunnel will work. But this new tunnel may be a non-starter. It was already $6 billion back then. I cannot imagine how much the price has skyrocketed in 2025. I still think the tunnel between Atlantic Avenue and Fulton Street should be considered, but for the connection with JFK Airport, it will only make sense to me if the service to the airport is a lot more frequent than 4 trains per hour. Like I said earlier, a direct rail link to JFK is not a top priority for me, but when the city starts considering a Southeast Queens extension or the JFK Airtrain needs to be replaced a few decades later, maybe it will be a great opportunity to build a direct rail link to JFK Airport. I don't know if the MTA can buy the Airtrain property for a subway conversion when it gets replaced. If not, the E-Train extension from Jamaica Center may be the way to go. What are your thoughts on transit connections to JFK Airport? Do you think a direct rail link to JFK should be built? Share with me in the comments below. I also made videos about transit connections to LaGuardia and Newark, which you can check out in this playlist. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in that playlist.